Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to make these cute tiny magnetic canvases just in time for spring or Easter. And we're going to be using some acrylic markers. And these are really fun for tiny projects like that. And if you don't care for magnets, you can also do those mini canvases. You can also paint on rocks, on shells, on glass, on fabric, wood, whatever you like with these markers. Now we're going to use two different types today, but if you only have one, that's totally fine. We're going to use the new Ohuhu brush tip and the dual tip markers. So this set of brush tip markers here come ready to go. All you got to do is shake them, and then I would recommend filling out the swatch sheet just so you kind of see how they go and you can see how opaque they are, because it comes with a black and white swatch sheet, and that way you can make sure everything's working and everything is good to go. This other set here, it's a 24 color set, but there's actually 48 markers, and you get 48 fine tip markers that are a 0.7 millimeter tip, so they're kind of like an ultrafine Posca, and then you get 24 of the big chunky markers which have a bullet tip that is about you can get a range on the bullet tip from about 1.8 to 2 millimeters, so a chunky tip, and then it has a chisel tip on the other end that's 4 millimeters long. And again, you get this beautiful bold ink with both of the markers, and these are also that same acrylic ink that you can use on all sorts of different surfaces. Now with these markers, you do have to shake them and then prime them to get them working, and I just do it right on the swatch card. That way you don't waste a bunch of ink, and they're very actually quick and easy to prime. I'm leaving this in real time so you can see, but it doesn't take much time at all to get that ink flowing and then fill in the little swatch there. So without further ado, let's get started on our project. The canvas that I'm working on is 2 inches square, and it's got a magnet backing so you can put it on the fridge. You could also use little scraps of cardboard or mat board for this type of project. The great thing about acrylic paint markers is that they're going to work on pretty much any surface that you can find. I'm starting off by using one of the fine tip pens in kind of a golden ochre color from the 48 pen set that has the 24 colors to sketch out the basic shape of our little chick here. And I have the finished magnet there on the table so you can see how it's going to turn out. I'm just basically looking for the basic shapes. So I've got kind of a circle for the head, I've got kind of an oval for the wing, an oval for the chest, and then it kind of goes into a teardrop shape for the tail feathers. And then I just put a couple little lines to signify where the legs were going to come out. Now you'll notice I don't have a lot of detail here yet because I just wanted to kind of block out where I wanted the chick to be before I put the background in. I'm going to use 2 shades of purple. Now you can use either the brush pen, which I showed you there, that works really well, or you can use our thicker nibbed marker from the 48 pen set. And that, like I mentioned before in the intro to this video, has an ability to swap out the nibs. So in the nib that comes with it, it actually has 2 ends. So the marker will come to you with a bullet nib sticking out, but you can flip that around and put the chisel nib out, and vice versa. So whatever you prefer to color with, that's up to you. I think that if you could only invest in one set of markers, I would go with the 48 markers, just because you've got the 24 fine tips and then you've got the 24 reversible tip markers. It just gives you a little bit more variety in the size of marks you can make, because it can be kind of difficult to get really fine lines with the brush tips. But obviously, you know what you like to use best, so you can go with either of them. I'm just filling in the background with a light purple from whichever marker set you prefer, and I'm getting up really close to the chick because I want to make sure there's no halo. That's why I started with a really rough drawing. I wanted to kind of figure out where that was going to be so I could leave that area totally blank on the canvas. Now these markers are fairly opaque, but no acrylic paint marker is going to be completely opaque in one coat, so I figured if I left the white area showing where the subject was, it was just going to save me some time and some material so I don't waste the ink. And there, that's our first coat there. Actually, you really only need to do 1 coat here, but if you, like I got some fingerprints there, I'll go over that. If you missed any spots, you can go back in and go over that. And you know your paint's going to match because it's coming out of the marker. Now, while it's still wet, I did go in with the darker purple brush tip marker, and I just added a little bit of a shadow. And I think it gives it a nice painterly effect. So at this point, I want to let this completely dry before I proceed on to the next step. I'm going to start off by using the yellow ochre marker and just kind of dab in any shadows that I see on the chick's body. Now I'm using this dabbing technique, and you can do this with the large bullet tip marker if you went with the 48 marker set, or the brush tip. It's up to you. I like the brush tip anytime I want to convey texture, but you certainly can do it with whatever you have. And I'm just dabbing in these kind of the bottom, chest, and belly of the bird, under the wing. I'm separating the sections, like the shapes that we drew, and that's just giving us a nice kind of fluffy texture to it, and also helping us show the volume and shape of the bird. Then after you've got the dark down, while the paint is still wet, I'm going in with this light yellow and still doing that dabbing motion, but I'm kind of overlapping the edges of the dark a bit so that it blends in and gives us that fuzzy, fluffy, soft look here. And I'm keeping this real time so you can see how long it's going to take, but these go pretty quickly. Now, a tip that I'll share if you're doing a bunch of these is to work in batches. So do all your backgrounds first. So if you're making, say, 3 magnets, do all your backgrounds first, and then go in and do all your first layer, and then just kind of work around so you're not waiting around for paint to dry all the time. So little tip share anytime I'm doing a bunch of little paintings like this. And basically, you're just gonna fill in. Now you want to go everywhere, even where you're gonna have brighter white highlights, because we'll apply those on top. But here, see how this has become soft and fluffy and textured instead of just a scratchy line artwork that we had. And I'm just going to throw in a couple lines to indicate where the legs are, and then I'm going to pick up my orange marker, and I'm going with a fine tip one, and I'm just going to draw those legs in and the little feet. And really, I'm not going to be too fussy with them because there's going to be grass around them, and I'm just letting some of the yellow show through on the top of the feet to give us the hint of a little bit of a highlight there. And I think that looks pretty good. Just yeah, don't overthink it. You know, I know we can get kind of in the weeds and we can feel like it's real complicated, but it doesn't have to be. And once that is in, we are going to switch to a fine tip white marker, and I am going to put this kind of like fluffy edges of the feathers that are kind of glowing in the sunlight on the back. And I can also use this to highlight any area that I want to appear more fluffy or to be sticking out more. I love to use this technique at the edges of animals because it almost makes them look backlit and glowy, and I think it's really kind of cute. And it's also a great way to like show that just the chunky fluffiness of a baby critter, which is just adorable. I think anytime you can do something like that, it just makes stuff look a little bit cuter. And I'm putting a little highlight on the feet while I'm at it. I'm also starting to just indicate where the beak is going to go. Now I'm going to work on the grass, and I'm taking this pretty spring green color that's from the brush markers and just pretty much indicating where patches of grass would be. Now I'm really just going for almost a vintage storybook look with these. That's why I wanted to do those pastel colors. I think that's very spring. It's very Easter. It's almost nursery-like. So you could do this on a big canvas and do like nursery paintings. I think that would be so cute. And then into the wet paint, I'm actually using a fine tip darker green marker, and I'm just flicking up some individual blades of grass. So we've got these clumps of grass, and then on top of that, we're just putting individual blades. And I think that's a really nice effect, and it's so easy to be able to convey depth and texture that way. And I'm back to the fine tip orange marker again, and the chick is dry at this point, and I'm sketching in the beak. I didn't want to sketch the beak on the chick while the chick was wet because it would feather. So that's why I went and did the grass first. So I hope that explains well. When in doubt, let it dry. If you want a crisp line, let it dry. If you want blended edges, you want to do it while it's wet. The yellow ochre is a good color for toning down the orange if need be, and also for adding that little bit of like cartilage over the beak there. And I'm also going in with this fine tip golden marker, the same color, the same yellow ochre we sketched with, and adding in any additional definition that I feel like I need, like under the wing, maybe on the belly. Just if it feels like it's a little bit too much of a blob, I'm going in there with that golden ochre color pen and adding a little bit more definition. But don't overdo it because you don't want to lose the fluffiness that we originally had. Don't worry if it's not too defined at this point because we will go in with some pens later. And then finally, I'm taking the black pen, and this is a little bit scary, but I'm just going to put a dab for each eye, and then I'm going to let it dry. You really want to make sure the chick is dry before you do this step. Make sure this canvas is completely dry before proceeding on to the next step, where we will be using the Ohuhu colored fine liners. I'm using the brown fine liner from the Ohuhu colored fine liner set to add detail to our magnet. I'm just going in kind of around the beak. I am putting in any little fine lining that I see, any place I want to have a little extra definition. This is a waterproof pen, but you have to make sure that the paint is dry on the canvas before you use it, or you will ruin the fine liner. Same thing goes with if you're using this on watercolor paper. Your watercolor paper has to be completely dry or you will ruin the pen. And you pay good money for these supplies. I don't want to see you ruin them. So if I seem to be a little bit scoldy about that, that's why. I just don't want to see you ruin your pens. The nice thing about this brown pen is that it will also kind of tone down some of the areas that may seem a little too bright, like the bright green grass, the bright orange legs, the beak. It just kind of helps with that kind of vintage storybook look because it is brown color, which also just kind of looks like sepia, looks nice and soft and muted. And I feel like it's soft. It goes good with the kind of storybook vibe. And it's very flattering, I think, with this Easter color palette. Now I'm taking an Ohuhu gel pen, just a white gel pen, and I'm adding little sparkles in the eyes of the chick. I'm also adding a little highlight on the crest of the beak, and I'm doing some tiny little fuzz along the head and the back. Anything you want it to be really crisp and bright, you can do that with the gel pen. If the gel pen stops working at any time when you're doing this, which it can happen when you're going over kind of slick, slippery acrylic paint, you can either scribble it on your hand. That's what I do. That seems to work the best. Or you could scribble it on some scrap paper to get the ink flowing again. It just happens with gel pens. I'm not sure why. They tend to be a little bit finicky, especially on a slick surface like acrylic paint. But yeah, I mean, it's just a really fun way to kind of be able to layer up and still keep a little bit of detail. Now, this got a little too mangy looking, so I wanted to soften out some of the really bright white lines. So I just went back in with that light yellow and kind of tapped on any of the marks that I thought were a little too a little too stiff or a little too bold, and that allowed me to soften things up. And that's pretty much it. So the next magnets that we do, and don't forget to sign your name because this is like a mini work of art for somebody. The next ones we're going to go through in time lapse, and you can see how it happens a lot quicker. So again, a reminder, we're just going to sketch the basic shape using a fine tip pen. That's your first step. And when you break down something like an animal into basic shapes like lines, teardrop shapes, ovals, it really can make any complex animal be simple. And remember, this is kind of a cute, almost cartoony storybook type vibe we're going for, so we don't need to be perfect. I like to use the brush tip for filling in. I think that works pretty well, and it feels like you're using a paintbrush, but you don't have to keep redipping and you don't have to clean it, which is all the better. But again, we're doing the background color, then a slightly darker color for the shadow. Let that dry. Remember, let it dry between doing the background and the coloring in. And then I'll use the same color that I sketched with to do my shadows. So same thing as we did the first time. And while as we're painting in here, our colors are still wet, and that allows us to blend in like we're using paint in a paintbrush. And because it's just a small area, even though acrylic paint pens dry quickly, they're going to stay wet long enough for you to do this technique. Now remember, if you get paint on a lighter color, on your lighter color marker, all you have to do is scribble it off on a scrap paper, and it's going to be clean and ready to be recapped. Now, the first time you use your pens for the day, just remember to give them a shake. After that, you can use them throughout your painting session and you don't have to reshake them. But it's just a good habit. When in doubt, shake it out. That's a great way to remember that. Now, doing those whiskers, I probably should have done that with a white gel pen rather than with a fine tip paint pen. Not because a fine tip pen isn't fine, it just puts out more paint than a gel pen does. So keep that in mind when you're deciding what pen to use. Now here we're using the fine liners to do because it doesn't put out as much ink, to do our details. And remember, you want your little canvas to be completely dry before you go in with your gel pens or fine liners so it doesn't damage the pen. But you can go back over with your acrylic markers at any time. So don't worry about that. You can always go back in with your acrylic markers. And again, here with our lamb, our last magnet, we're going to sketch in quickly with our fine tip marker. And I'm using gray again. And I just love cute little baby animals. Oh my gosh, so adorable. Now this time I thought I didn't have enough contrast between the white lamb and that light blue background, so I decided to go with a darker blue color. So I'm using the darkest blue at the bottom, then I'm going in with the medium blue and just kind of bringing it up, and these are all on the brush ones, and then I'm going in with my lightest blue because I did like that light blue. It was just too light and I thought the lamb looked a little washed out. So then I'm going back through and I'm wet blending the background just so it has a little more texture and I'm getting kind of an ombre effect. And I will want to let this dry as usual before we go in and we start painting the lamb. But as we go back in with the lamb, this time I'm putting in a little bit of pink for the ears and blending it out with that blush color. And I'm going in with, and there's a couple shadows when we're doing this white animal, because this woolly lamb has some kind of like brownish shadows and some grayish shadows. So I'm tapping those in, just like we did with the chick. I'm tapping them in to build the texture and build that shadow color so that when I do add the white, because it's a white animal, but we got to have those shadows there to make him appear white. So that when we go in with a white brush pen, as we are now, we'll be able to work back into that color and get some subtle blending and also build that woolly texture that we want for our little lamb. And how adorable. How adorable. I think this might be my favorite one. I don't know. I like them all. What can I say? I am a sucker for cute little baby animal storybook Easter Easter things. But yeah, just keep working back and forth with those colors until you get the texture that you're looking for. It's not over till you say it's over. Your painting is not done until you say it's done. You can basically go over with more and more and more acrylic paint until you like the way it looks. The acrylic paint in this acrylic ink is so thin and layerable that you really can keep tweaking it until you're happy with the way it looks. And I'm doing the same exact technique I did with the grass on the other two. Just put it down with a lighter green brush pen and then go in with a darker green fine line, hard tip fine line pen and layer it up. And now once that's dry, we're going in with our fine liner, we're adding our detail. It's really a simple 3-step process. And I think these are super adorable to make, and you can get packs of like 24 of these little canvas magnets. How fun would that be to put out on the table before Easter dinner and let all of the family members make a magnet or two? If you make a mistake, you can also blot it off and have another go at it, which is something I really like. Acrylic pens are fun and versatile, and I hope you give them a try. I want to thank Ohuhu for sponsoring this video today. I'm going to have the links to all the products I used in the video description, as well as a coupon code to save you even more money at ohuhu.com. Thank you so much for watching. Happy Easter. Until next time, happy crafting.